The deepest quiet of the night began to yield not a sound, but to a subtle lightening of the eastern sky. High upon the observation mound, a lone skywatcher, wrapped in coarse wool against the pre-dawn chill, offered a silent farewell to the fading celestial map. He had watched the Great Bear circle its unseen pivot point for hours, its steady journey a comfort in the profound solitude. Now, as the first faint blush of rose and ochre painted the horizon, he carefully rolled his star chart, the markings on its papyrus a testament to another night of patient vigil. Below, within the village, life was stirring a gentle waking. The faint aroma of wood smoke, thin and ethereal, began to drift from the first kindled hearths, mingling with the cool, earthy scent of damp soil. Inside the simple mud-brick homes, families unrolled their woven sleeping mats. The soft rustle of straw and cloth was punctuated by the low bleat of a distant goat, a clucking hen, and the hesitant chirping of sparrows greeting the dawn. As the sun's first golden rim crowned the eastern hills, casting long, wavering shadows across the waking landscape, many turned towards the nascent light, hands lifted in quiet reverence. Simple prayers whispered to the rising giver of light and warmth, a silent acknowledgment of the day's fresh promise. Breakfast was a humble affair. Thick, warm flatbreads, made from grains harvested under the same sun, perhaps dipped in honey or accompanied by a handful of dried figs. The scent of baking bread, wholesome and comforting, now filled the crisp morning air, competing with the pervasive wood smoke. With the sun now fully risen, casting a benevolent warmth, the village slipped into its rhythmic morning chores. The men, dressed in simple linen tunics, prepared their tools, hoes, sickles, wooden plows, before heading to the fields where the barley and wheat stood in green rows, whispering in the gentle breeze. Women gathered at the communal well, the soft clatter of clay jars against stone echoing with their quiet conversations. Others settled inside their homes, the rhythmic scrape of hand mills grinding grain a constant, soothing thrum, or the soft thud-thud of a loom beginning its intricate dance. For the Skywatchers, their morning ritual was a different kind of labor. The elder, with his apprentices gathered around him, carefully unrolled the night's observations. His gnarled fingers traced the delicate lines on a clay tablet, notations of planetary movements and lunar phases, etched while the world slept. The apprentices, their eyes keen and eager, followed his every gesture, their young minds absorbing the ancient wisdom of the cosmos. They discussed a subtle shift of a star's position, the path of a comet, or the timing of a coming celestial alignment. Later, they would clean and prepare their simple sighting instruments, readying them for the next night's patient vigil, or practice charting the basic movements of familiar constellations. As the morning progressed, the sun climbed steadily, its warmth deepening. The fields hummed with the quiet industry of farmers, their figures bent over the soil. The rhythmic sounds of life continued. The distant lowing of cattle, the steady scrape of the grain mill, the murmur of voices from the well. A gentle breeze rustled through the reeds bordering the nearby water source, carrying the faintest scent of green growth. Children, their chores done, played near their homes, their laughter light and carefree, a joyful counterpoint to the day's steady rhythm. By midday the sun stood high, its golden gaze directly overhead. The air grew still and heavy, and the intense heat began to press down. Activities in the field slowed, the farmer seeking to shade a lone tree or a simple lean-to for a brief respite. Indoors, the work became lighter, less strenuous. A simple midday meal, perhaps leftover bread and some fresh greens, offered a moment of quiet repose before the heat of the afternoon would fully descend, signaling a period of rest, a gentle pause in the turning wheel of the day. The quiet breath of dawn had already begun its gentle negotiation with the shadows, coaxing them to soften, to recede without fuss. It was not a sudden burst, but a prolonged, tender unfolding, as if the world itself was carefully stretching from a deep slumber. The air, cool and fresh, carried with the faintest scent of damp earth and distant, awakening flora, a subtle perfume that hinted at renewal. There was no urgency in this transition, only an effortless becoming, a slow, graceful ballet of light and form. A single, sustained note from a bird, a robin perhaps, drifted into the barely open window, a clear, sweet offering to the still unfolding day. It was not a call to action, but a soft affirmation, a sonic thread woven into the fabric of the pervasive stillness. The sound hung in the air for a moment, then gently dissolved, leaving behind a deeper sense of peace, as if its brief presence had only highlighted the vast quietude surrounding it. This was a kind of silence that hummed with life, rather than the silence of emptiness, a vibrant, living stillness that held everything within its tender embrace. Within this hush, the small, intimate details of the room began to emerge in the lingering twilight. The faint sheen on the polished wood of the bedside table, the soft texture of a woven blanket draped across a chair, the subtle shift in the color of the curtain as the light found its way through. Each element seemed to awaken with its own quiet dignity, not demanding attention, but simply revealing itself, inviting a gaze that was unhurried and appreciative. There was a quiet dignity in their presence, a steadfastness that was comforting. Time, in this gentle space, seemed to lose its linear insistence. It expanded, stretched, and folded in on itself, becoming a soft continuum rather than a series of ticking moments. Each breath felt fuller, each tiny observation more profound, not because of any inherent complexity, but because the mind was allowed to linger, to settle, to simply be present without expectation. The edges of thought blurred, and a sense of deep ease began to permeate, a quiet surrender to the quiet truth of the morning. The light continued its patient work, now illuminating tiny dust motes dancing in a single shaft that pierced the room, tiny galaxies swirling in the still air. They moved with unhurried grace, ephemeral and beautiful, reflecting the soft glow. To watch them was to observe a miniature universe, a quiet ballet of the unseen, reminding one of the intricate, delicate life that thrived even in the most ordinary spaces. There was no need for grand statements or loud pronouncements. The world whispers profound truths in such moments, in the gentle swirl of dust, in the patient unfurling of light, in the solitary note of a waking bird. This was a space where the soul could unfurl, like a delicate fern frond reaching for the sun, slowly, deliberately, without rush or demand. It was a soft invitation to simply exist, to breathe, to observe the slow, exquisite ballet of existence as it unfolded, moment by tender moment. The world outside waited, but for now, this gentle awakening was enough. A silent symphony played on the strings of light and quietude. The gentle warmth of the afternoon sun, no longer fierce, laid a soft amber sheen across the worn wooden sill beneath her hand. It carried the faint, earthy scent of damp soil and the distant, sweet whisper of honeysuckle, a fragrance that always promised a linger of summer, even as the days grew shorter. She had settled into this familiar quiet, a deep, unassuming contentment that folded around her like a well-loved blanket. The old armchair, shaped her contours over countless hours of quiet repose, offered its usual comfort, cradling her as if it too understood the need for stillness. Through the window, the world outside unfolded in hues of deepening green and burgeoning gold. The ancient oak in the garden, its branches reaching like gnarled arms, cast long, wavering shadows across the lawn, slowly stretching and deepening as the sun continued its unhurried descent. Each leaf on the oak seemed to hold a tiny, intricate world within its veins, catching the light in 1,000 tiny glints. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible shift, yet one that held profound beauty for those willing to notice. A lone bee, heavy with pollen, buzzed languidly past the glass, its journey a testament to life's persistent hum. She watched it disappear toward the patch of lavender by the stone wall, a small, diligent worker in a vast, unhurried landscape. The only other sound was the soft rustle of the breeze through the leaves, a sound like distant silk, and the occasional, sleepy chirp of a hidden bird, content within its leafy sanctuary. There was no urgency here, no clamor for attention, only the quiet unfolding of time itself. Her gaze drifted beyond the garden's boundary, to the gentle undulations of the hills in the distance, their slopes now softened by the afternoon light into gradients of muted green and blue. A thin mist, barely perceptible, began to gather in the hollows, promising the cool embrace of evening. It was a landscape that had seen countless seasons, countless days like this, and held within its silent expanse a deep sense of enduring peace. She felt a part of it, not just an observer, but a silent participant in its quiet rhythm. Memories, soft and unbidden, drifted to the surface of her thoughts, not sharply defined scenes, but rather the lingering warmth of moments, like the scent of old parchment or the touch of a worn fabric. They were gentle echoes, nothing demanding or sorrowful, simply the quiet resonance of a life lived. This feeling, this slow unspooling of time and thought, was a precious gift, a space where the hurried edges of the world faded, leaving only the tranquil core. The light continued its quiet transformation, washing the room in softer, richer tones. The shadows grew longer, more defined, stretching across the floor like velvet ribbons. Soon, the first stars would begin to prick the deepening blue of the sky. But for now, there was only this profound, enveloping calm. She remained, suspended in the moment, breathing in the quietude, letting the slow, gentle rhythm of the fading day settle deeply within her. It was a perfect, unhurried ending to a perfect, unhurried day. The last blush of the day lingered, a hesitant farewell painted across the western sky. It was a color not easily named, a subtle blend of lavender and rose, softening the edges of the distant hills, making them seem less like solid ground and more like a watercolor wash on a delicate canvas. This gentle retreat of light always brought with it profound stillness, a hushed reverence that invited reflection. The world outside, usually bustling with the unseen movements of late afternoon, seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the first stars to pinprick the deepening blue. Within the quiet confines of the room, the fading light performed its own quiet dance. Shadows, which had been crisp and defined earlier, now stretched and softened, blurring the familiar contours of furniture and books. The armchair by the window, where earlier a patch of golden sunlight had rested, now sat cloaked in a deepening gray, its fabric losing definition, becoming merely a shape against the wall. There was a comfort in this dissolution, a sense of shedding the day's sharp edges, allowing the mind to wander freely without the insistent demands of clarity. The air itself seemed to grow denser, cooler, carrying with it the faint, clean scent of damp earth from the garden beyond the pane, mingled with the dry, comforting smell of old paper from the shelves. It was in these moments, as the day transitioned into night, that the smallest sounds became amplified, taking on a new significance. The distant hoot of an owl, a singular melancholic call, seemed to ripple through profound silence, only to be swallowed whole again. The rustle of leaves in a faint, rising breeze against the window, a sound that during the day would have gone unnoticed, now felt like a quiet conversation among ancient things. Each creak of the old house settling, each almost imperceptible shift, spoke of a slow, continuous existence, a gentle breathing that had gone on for decades, long before this current observer, and would continue long after. There was a quiet reassurance in this, a sense of belonging to something vast and enduring. Thoughts, unbidden and unhurried, began to drift like the wisps of cloud that sometimes caught the last light high above. They were not urgent thoughts or problems to be solved, but rather gentle meanderings through memories, through feelings, through the simple appreciation of being. There was a quiet acceptance of the flow of time, not as a relentless march, but as a soft, rhythmic tide, bringing in and drawing out moments, experiences, and emotions. The weight of the day, whatever small burdens it might have carried, seemed to dissipate with the light, leaving behind only a lightness, a sense of spaciousness within the mind. It was a state akin to meditation, but without effort, simply a natural unfolding of peace. To sit there unmoving, to simply exist in the fading light, felt like an essential act, a necessary recalibration. In a world often insistent on speed and noise, these quiet evenings offered an antidote, a balm for the spirit. There was no need for grand pronouncements or profound insights. The wisdom lay in the simple presence, in the gentle awareness of the breath, the cool air on the skin, the quiet beauty of the world slowly surrendering to slumber. This deep well of stillness, always present beneath the surface of daily life, offered a constant source of renewal, a quiet promise of replenishment for the days ahead. It was a silent conversation with the unfolding moment, a deep breath taken in unison with the turning world, a soft lullaby for the soul. The velvet cloak of night had unfurled over Luoyang, the grand capital of the Eastern Han dynasty. A profound hush had fallen, broken only by the distant murmur of the Luo River and the whisper of the breeze through ancient cypress trees. High within the Imperial Observatory, a tower of finely dressed stone, a different kind of quiet reigned, a stillness born of focused contemplation. Here, under the watchful gaze of the celestial sphere, sat Zhongheng. He was not a man of hurried gestures or boisterous pronouncements, but profound patience, his mind a quiet lake reflecting the cosmos. Tonight, as on countless nights before, he was engaged in his sacred duty, to read the heavens, to discern their silent narratives, and to chart the intricate dance of light above. At the heart of his chamber, bathed in the soft, unwavering glow of an oil lamp, stood his magnificent creation, the water-powered armillary sphere. Crafted from polished bronze, its interconnected rings gleamed faintly, each one representing a pathway, a celestial coordinate, or a vast circle of the sky. A gentle, rhythmic drip, drip, drip could be heard, the persistent whisper of water filling a clepsydra, its steady flow turning unseen gears. This ingenious mechanism ensured the sphere rotated in precise synchronization with the true motions of the cosmos, mirroring the heavens with an accuracy that awed his contemporaries. Zhang Heng's robes, woven from cool silk, stirred lightly as he adjusted his position, his breath even and slow. His gaze, deep and unwavering, passed from the intricate bronze work to the star-pricked opening in the observatory's roof. He was meticulously plotting the course of a particular wandering star, a planet whose path had deviated slightly from the predictions of older texts. The air, cool and dry, carried the faint, earthy scent of ancient scrolls and the clean metallic tang of bronze. He held a slender brush, poised over a bamboo slip, his inkstone a pool of liquid darkness beside him. Each observation was a stroke, each measurement a testament to the sky's eternal order. He traced the slow, deliberate movement of a star across a specific ring, noting the precise time, guided by the water clock's faithful rhythm. There was no rush, no urgency, only the quiet pursuit of understanding. The celestial river, the Milky Way, spilled across the dark canvas above, a shimmering band of countless distant suns, each a silent note in a cosmic symphony. In these moments, the boundary between earth and sky seemed to dissolve. Zhang Heng felt less like an observer and more like a participant in the cosmic unfolding. The vastness was not overwhelming, but encompassing, a gentle embrace. The methodical hum of his sphere, the soft rustle of his clothing, the distant chirp of a cricket, all blended into the quiet harmony of the night. His work was more than mere science. It was a communion for the Han Emperor. The heavens held the mandate of power, and understanding their movements was paramount to ruling justly. For Zhang Heng, it was a quest of profound truth, a quiet act of devotion to the elegant mechanics of the universe. In the serene discipline of his observation, he found a deep and abiding peace, a connection to the timeless rhythm of existence. The sky was a vast scroll, written in light, for those patient enough to read its ancient, silent script. As the night deepened and the stars continued their slow, majestic procession, Zhang Heng remained a quiet sentinel, gazing through time. The early light, thin and hesitant, began its slow journey across the room. It did not burst forth, but rather seeped in, a liquid gold spreading inch by careful inch from the eastern window. Dust motes, tiny universes adrift, awakened in its path, performing their silent, ancient dance. They twirled and rose, fell and spun again, ephemeral ballet dancers on a stage of air, illuminated by the benevolent gaze of the sun. There was no sound, save for the whisper of the breeze stirring the leaves just beyond the glass, a sighing murmur that barely disturbed the stillness. It was a kind of quiet that allowed one's own breath to be heard, a soft rhythm in the vast expanse of the morning. Time, in this space, seemed to stretch, elastic and forgiving, each minute unspooling with deliberate grace. There was no urgency, no clamor for attention, only the gentle unfolding of the day. A cup sat on the small, worn wooden table, still warm, condensation beating faintly on its ceramic surface. The scent of chamomile, subtle and comforting, rose in a wisp, an invisible thread connecting the present moment to countless other mornings of quiet contemplation. It was a fragrance that spoke of peace, of moment savor rather than rushed, of a world that understood the value of slowness. The fingers tracing the rim of the cup moved without thought, a purely instinctive gesture. There was a faint warmth emanating from the ceramic, a small, reassuring anchor in the coolness of the morning. It was not a chill that bit, but a freshness that invigorated, a gentle coolness that invited one to pull a shawl a little tighter, or to simply wrap oneself more deeply in the quietude. Outside, the garden was still draped in dew, each blade of grass and every budding leaf holding a perfect, glistening drop. They caught the nascent light, transforming the ordinary into 1,000 tiny jewels, scattering prisms of muted color across the waking earth. A robin, bolder than the other garden inhabitants, hopped across the damp lawn, its movements precise and unhurried, pausing now and then to cock its head, listening for secrets beneath the soil. Its song, when it came, was a tentative, fluting melody, a soft declaration of life in the quiet dawn. It was a sound that did not demand attention, but rather offered it, a simple gift to the listening air. Such moments, unburdened by expectation, held a profound weight. They were not grand, not momentous, yet they carried the essence of being. To simply observe, to be present without the need to act or to speak, was a rare and precious art. It was in these unassuming intervals that understanding often found its way, not through forceful revelation, but through a gradual, almost imperceptible softening of the mind. Thoughts, like the dust motes, drifted and settled, leaving behind a clarity that felt both ancient and new. The notion of rush, of the frantic pursuit that often characterized a day, felt distant, almost alien here. It was as if this pocket of time existed outside the usual currents, a still pool reflecting the truest sky. The air itself seemed to breathe slower, expand and contract with a more measured pace. There was a gentle invitation to sink into this rhythm, to let the shoulders relax, to allow the breath to deepen, to release the subtle tensions that clung to the edges of awareness. This was not idleness, but a form of quiet engagement, a deep listening to the world's most subtle hum. It was a conscious choice to inhabit the present fully, to allow the gentle flow of light and shadow, of sound and silence, to wash over the spirit. In this stillness, a delicate sense of balance emerged, a quiet knowing that all was as it should be, unfolding in its own unhurried time. The light, as it always did in these early hours, crept in without fanfare, a patient guest making its quiet presence known. It was not a sudden, sharp intrusion, but rather a slow, deliberate unfurling, like the petals of a deep-colored bloom opening to the warmth. First, a faint pearlescent gleam edged the window pane. Then it softened the shadow-draped corners of the room, coaxing the hushed air into a gentle luminescence. One could almost feel the very molecules of the air stir, not in a draft, but in a delicate dance with the increasing brightness, becoming less dense, more permeable, as if the space itself were drawing a deep, slow breath. A profound stillness settled upon everything, unbroken by even the most subtle of distant sounds. The world outside seemed to hold its breath in concert with the room's quietude. There was only the gentle insistence of the light, now painting the worn floorboards in stripes of gold and amber, tracing the delicate patterns on the old wallpaper, illuminating dust motes that floated lazily, like tiny, contented stars in their own private cosmos. This wasn't merely absence of noise, but a deeper quiet, a presence of peace so profound it almost hummed, a low, resonant note struck somewhere within the heart of the morning. It invited a loosening of the shoulders, a softening of the gaze, an unclenching of thoughts that often gripped too tightly. There was no need for haste here, no pressing appointment to keep, no urgent call to answer. Time, within these walls, seemed to lose its rigid structure, becoming more fluid, more yielding. It stretched and contracted with the rhythm of one's own quiet breathing, allowing moments to expand into small eternities. One could spend a long while simply observing the way a single beam of sun, slowly shifting, revealed the intricate texture of a wooden frame, or how the dust motes, once illuminated, would fade back into invisibility as the light moved on. This unhurried observation was meditation in itself, a silent conversation between the self and the quiet intricacies of the immediate world. A faint, almost imperceptible warmth began to spread from where the sunlight touched the nearby armchair. It seeped into the fabric, radiating outward with a comforting, steady embrace. The air, though still cool in the deepest shadows, carried the promise of the day's warmth, a subtle, sweet scent of lingering dew and awakening earth. This was the beauty of these moments, not in grand events or startling revelations, but in the quiet accumulation of tiny, perfect sensations. The slight coolness of the porcelain mug held in cupped hands, the faint whisper of breath in the tranquil air, the soft drape of fabric against skin. Each sensation, small in itself, wove together into a tapestry of deep, abiding contentment. To exist within this quiet pocket of time felt like drifting on a calm, deep lake, where the surface mirrored the sky and the currents below were too gentle to be felt. It was a space for thoughts to unfurl slowly, like the light itself, not to be chased or hurried, but simply observed as they drifted by. Memories, too, arose in this gentle current, not with the sharp edges of regret or the sting of longing, but softened by the pervasive peace, viewed through a lens of quiet acceptance. This slowness, this profound stillness, was not an emptiness, but fullness, brimming with a subtle, enduring beauty of simply being present completely and utterly in the quiet unfolding of a new day. The light continued its slow, deliberate journey across the floorboards, a silent tide receding from the warmth it had offered moments before. It was not a sudden departure, but a patient, lingering farewell, each degree of change imperceptible on its own, yet cumulatively marking the passage from afternoon's embrace to evening's quiet anticipation. Dust motes, suspended in the golden shaft that still pierced the air, danced with an almost languid grace, tiny, forgotten galaxies spinning in their own unhurried orbits. They seemed to possess an ancient wisdom, moving without haste, content in their momentary illumination before fading back into the general, ambient softness of the room. A whisper of a breeze, barely perceptible, stirred the sheer curtains, causing them to billow inward with a sigh that was more felt than heard. It carried with the faintest scent of damp earth and distant, blooming jasmine, a fleeting promise of the coolness that would soon settle over the land. The air itself felt softer, less vibrant than the midday's keen clarity, softened by the encroaching twilight. Sounds, too, seemed to recede, muffled and gentled, as if the world outside was drawing a vast, protective blanket over its sharper edges. The distant murmur of traffic became a mere hum, absorbed and diffused, no longer an intrusion, but a background rhythm to the deepening stillness. In this diminishing light, thoughts too seemed to slow, unspooling with a different kind of grace. There was no urgency to seize or define them, no need to tether them to a specific purpose. They drifted, much like the dust motes, ephemeral and free, touching upon memories or observations with a delicate curiosity. It was a time for simply being, for allowing the gentle current of existence to carry one without resistance. The edges of worries, so sharp and insistent in the harsher light of day, softened and blurred, becoming less tangible, less demanding of immediate attention. A sense of quiet acceptance began to bloom, a gentle understanding that some moments were simply meant for silent absorption. The leaves outside the window, once vibrant with the full force of the sun, now shifted into deeper, richer greens, their individual forms becoming less distinct as the shadows lengthened. They rustled softly, a sound like dry silk, each tiny movement a testament to persistent, yet unobtrusive life that thrived just beyond the glass. It was a reminder of the unending cycle, the constant turning of the earth, the patient unfolding of all things. There was a profound comfort in this predictability, this gentle rhythm of light and dark, growth and rest, a timeless dance performed with exquisite, unhurried grace that defied the human rush. As the last sliver of direct light vanished, giving way to the pervasive, soft blue-gray of dusk, the room took on a new character. Objects, once starkly defined, now melted into softer contours, their forms suggested rather than declared. A quiet peace settled, deeper and more pervasive than before, a peace that did not demand attention but simply existed, inviting one to sink into its embrace. It was the kind of peace that fills spaces between heartbeats, that dwells in the pause before a breath, a gentle, sustained quietude that nourished the soul and prepared it for the deeper repose of the night to come. The world had not ceased. It had merely slowed its pulse, offering a moment of profound, tender stillness before its next quiet awakening. In the deep hush that settles after the sun dips below the horizon, when the first brave pinpricks of light appear in the inky canvas above, the ancient Skywatchers of Aldoria found their peace. Their days might have been filled with the rustle of reeds by the river, the lowing of cattle, the quiet hum of basket weaving, but their nights belonged to the stars. They understood the patient turning of the heavens, charting the slow dance of constellations across generations, building immense stone calendars, and aligning their doorways to greet the equinox sun. Yet, Amidst these grand, resonant structures lies a quieter, more delicate mystery, a riddle left not in towering monoliths, but in the whisper of small stones. These are not the famous standing stones, nor the great carved observatories whose precise functions we have, through patient scholarship, begun to unravel. No, this enigma presents itself in small, unassuming gatherings, across various Eldorian sites, nestled within the quieter courtyards, sometimes near a hearth long cold, or beside the foundations of a forgotten dwelling. Archaeologists have occasionally unearthed clusters of polished, river-smooth stones. They are rarely larger than a thumb, often just pebbles, yet each bears the unmistakable mark of human touch, a gentle polish, a faint etching too subtle to be a deliberate symbol, more like the lingering trace of a thought. Their arrangement is the true puzzle. They are never scattered haphazardly. Instead, they are found in loose, almost ephemeral patterns. 3 here, 5 there, sometimes a spiral, sometimes a line of 7, always slightly askew from any obvious celestial alignment. Sometimes a pattern seems to mirror a known constellation, but then one stone will be out of place, or an entire group will be missing. Other times, the formation seems to hold no relation to the skies at all, appearing instead like a miniature, abstract map of an imagined landscape, or perhaps the random fall of autumn leaves. The whispers of time have carried away any clear explanation. Were they tokens of forgotten game, played under the watchful eye of a silent moon? Did they mark the passage of a personal cycle, a quiet tally kept by an individual beneath the infinite expanse? Perhaps they were a form of intimate, private sky charting, a way for an elder to explain the subtle shifts in the heavens to a child, using simple, tangible representations before the grander lessons began. One might imagine a finger tracing the path of a slowly moving luminary, rearranging the tiny stones as the days turned into weeks, and the star paths shifted almost imperceptibly. The beauty of this mystery lies in its elusive nature. There are no definitive answers, no grand pronouncements to be made. The stones offer only a silent invitation to wonder, to let the mind drift like smoke in the ancient air. They speak not of cosmic events or calendrical precision, but of something far more human and yet equally profound. The quiet contemplation of individuals, their personal connection to the night sky, their small gestures of understanding the universe both immense and deeply personal. We are left with only the faint, smooth feel of these river-worn pebbles and the soft, lingering question of what gentle secrets they once held, cradled in the palms of ancient Skywatchers, under nights as peaceful and star-dusted as our own. The moon continues its patient journey, and the stones remain a soft, unsolved murmur from a time long past. The gentle seep of the afternoon light continued its slow, deliberate journey across the polished floorboards. It was a pilgrimage of warmth, each ray stretching then softening, as if unsure of its next step, before finally yielding to gathering shadows in the far corner of the room. A hush, almost palpable, seemed to settle deeper with each passing moment, inviting a quiet contemplation that required no words, no conscious thought, merely presence. The air itself felt unhurried, carrying the faintest whisper of the outside world, a distant murmur of leaves stirred by an almost imperceptible breeze, a sound so faint it seemed more a memory of sound, rather than its true echo. The subtle unfolding of the day's gentle decline possessed a quiet majesty. There was no urgency in its descent, only a graceful surrender. The faint patterns on the wallpaper, previously unnoticed in the brighter glare of morning, now emerged with soft clarity, their delicate curves and muted hues offering a quiet comfort. Each thread, each tiny imperfection in the fabric of the old armchair, seemed to tell a silent story, not of grand events, but of countless quiet afternoons, of the gentle press of hands and the lingering scent of old books. It was a space that breathed stillness, a sanctuary from the quickened pulse of the world beyond its walls. A cup, still holding the residual warmth of tea, rested on the small, unassuming table beside the window. Its steam had long since vanished, dissipating into the tranquil air, but the lingering fragrance of bergamot remained, a comforting anchor in quietude. To simply sit, to breathe in the subtle notes of the room, to feel the gentle descent of dusk as a gradual easing rather than an abrupt ending, was to enter a different kind of time. It was a time that stretched and expanded, unbound by ticking clocks or hurried appointments. Here, moments did not pass. They simply unfolded, like petals unfurling on a slow-motion bloom, each revealing a new layer of serene beauty. The light, having completed its languid dance across the floor, now gathered softly around the edges of the window pane, outlining the silhouette of a single, slender branch outside. The leaves on this branch, barely visible against the encroaching twilight, seemed to hold their breath, perfectly still, awaiting the deeper slumber of a night. There was no rustle, no sway, just a perfect, profound calm. The world outside the glass, though still connected, seemed to drift further away, becoming a soft painting, its edges blurring into a harmonious wash of dimming colors. This particular quietude was not an emptiness, but a rich fullness. It was filled with the gentle hum of existence, the unspoken rhythm of the house settling into itself, the almost imperceptible shift of shadows elongating into soft, velvety pools. It was a quiet that encouraged one to sink deeper into the cushions, to let the shoulders relax, to allow the breath to slow to its own natural, unforced pace. Every element within this tranquil sphere seemed to conspire in harmony, weaving a tapestry of peace so finely spun that it felt like a caress upon the spirit. The world, for these precious, lingering moments, was a soft whisper, a gentle sigh, perfectly content in its own quiet unfolding. There was nothing to seek, nothing to grasp, only to be present in the tender embrace of the fading day. The last sliver of sun, hesitant and thin, had retreated from the window pane, leaving behind a deepening hush. It was then that the silence truly began to settle, not as an absence, but as a presence weighty and soft. The air, once faintly tinged with the crispness of late afternoon, softened into a velvet embrace, carrying the ghost of wood smoke from a distant hearth or the quiet, earthy scent of damp soil stirred by a recent light rain. There was a particular quality to this fading light, a hesitant surrender that painted the familiar contours of the room in shades of sepia and rose, blurring the sharp edges until everything seemed to exist in a tender, half-remembered dream. It invited a slowing of the breath, a quiet unfolding of the mind. The old armchair, where so many hours had gently accumulated, absorbed the last whisper warmth, its worn fabric now cool beneath the palm. There was no urgency to rise, no pressing thought that demanded action or articulate response. Instead, a pleasant lassitude spread, a quiet recognition of the day's slow descent into evening's quietude. It was a time for observation, not the grand and obvious, but of the subtle, the almost imperceptible shifts that marked the passage of moments. The faint tremor of the window panes in a barely there breeze, the almost inaudible creak of timbers settling, the soft sigh of the house exhaling its day. Each sound, each subtle change in light, seemed to echo a deeper quiet within, a space where thoughts drifted like leaves on a still pond, touching down briefly before dissolving into the greater expanse. Memories, not sharp or demanding, but soft-edged and indistinct, began to surface from the tranquil depths. A smile, a touch, a fragment of a long-forgotten melody. They were not replayed with vivid detail, but rather felt as a warm, comforting presence, a testament to the layers of experience that had been woven into the fabric of one's being. There was a profound acceptance in this, a gentle understanding that what had been remained, not as a burden or regret, but as an integral part of the quiet, unfolding narrative. The world outside continued its own slow turning, yet here, within these walls, time seemed to elongate, to stretch into an elastic continuum where past and present merged without friction. The notion of things to do receded to an almost laughable distance, replaced by the simple, profound act of being. It was a liberation, in its own way, to relinquish the constant striving, the ceaseless demand for progress, and instead to simply inhabit the quiet ebb and flow. The very dust motes dancing in the last vestiges of light, previously invisible, now caught the eye, each a tiny, perfect universe, suspended in the gentle currents of the air, moving without haste, without purpose, simply existing. This quiet, often overlooked space between the active hours of the day and the deep slumber of night held a peculiar magic. It was a threshold, not one to be crossed with apprehension, but with a deep, calming breath. It allowed for the contemplation of small wonders, the way a shadow lengthened across the floor, transforming a familiar rug into an abstract landscape, the almost imperceptible softening of the sky from a faint lavender to an indigo so deep it felt like a caress. There was no need for grand pronouncements or dramatic revelations, only the quiet appreciation of the world's gentle unraveling, piece by delicate piece. And so the quiet deepened, folding around the solitary figure like a well-worn shawl, promising nothing but the soft comfort of its presence. The mind, unburdened, continued its slow drift, content in the knowledge that some moments were simply meant to be experienced, felt deeply, and allowed to pass without explanation or analysis. The evening waited patiently, an open, welcoming expanse, ready to receive whatever quiet unfolding of thought might bring. The light, once crisp and bright, now began its slow descent, a deliberate, unhurried surrender to the encroaching quiet. It was not a sudden departure, but gradual dissolution, like a dye gently bleeding into water, softening every edge, blurring every line. The sharp angles of the afternoon yielded to a gentle curve, and the vibrant greens of the trees deepened, taking on a richer, more contemplative hue. Each leaf, once distinct and individual, now contributed to a unified, breathing mass, absorbing the last faint warmth of the day. This descent was accompanied by a subtle shift in the air itself. A faint coolness began to permeate, a whisper against the skin, carried with it the scent of damp earth and distant, unseen blossoms. The world seemed to hold its breath, not in anticipation of something jarring, but in a shared moment of transition, a collective sigh. Sounds that had been clear and defined throughout the day. The distant hum of traffic, the chirping of a persistent bird, the rustle of leaves, now seemed to recede, becoming muffled, as if wrapped in a soft woolen blanket. They were still present, yet their presence was diminished, absorbed into the increasing hush that spread across the landscape. Within this gentle enveloping, thought, too, began to slow. The rapid currents of the day's concerns, the insistent demands of productivity, the quick, sharp decisions, all began to lose their urgency. They did not vanish entirely, but rather softened, much like the light, becoming less insistent, less demanding of immediate attention. It was as if the mind, sensing the approaching quiet, instinctively prepared itself to align with the rhythms of the world around it. A spaciousness opened within, allowing for a broader, less focused awareness. One might find oneself simply observing, without the need to name or categorize, merely to be present in the unfolding moment. This particular hour, poised between the known and the unknown, between the activity of day and the mystery of night, held a profound invitation. It was an invitation to release, to unfurl the tightly held tensions, to allow the shoulders to drop, the breath to deepen. There was no need for effort, no striving. The process was entirely natural, an organic response to the world's patient unfolding. The shadows, once merely the absence of light, now became entities unto themselves, stretching long and slender across the ground, reaching like gentle fingers, drawing the world into a comforting embrace. They were not ominous, but rather protective, a soft veil drawn over the details of the day, allowing for a simpler, more essential perception. As the last vestiges of daylight surrendered completely, the first faint pinpricks of light began to emerge in the darkening dome above. Not a sudden burst, but a hesitant glimmer, then another and another, until a quiet sprinkling adorned the sky. These were not the blinding illuminations of the sun, but distant, ancient fires, each a tiny, perfect beacon in the vastness. Their appearance was a testament to enduring presence, a gentle reminder that even in the deepest quietude, there is light, there is continuity, there is a subtle, overarching pattern. This slow progression, from the fading of one light to the gentle emergence of another, mirrored a fundamental truth about existence. It spoke of cycles, of endings that were merely beginnings in disguise, of transitions that held their own quiet beauty. There was no harshness in this change, no abruptness, only a fluid, almost liquid movement from one state to the next. The world, in its quiet grace, demonstrated the art of letting go, of yielding to the inevitable without resistance, finding peace in the very act of transition. And in witnessing this patient unfolding, one could learn to apply the same gentle understanding to the shifts within one's own life, embracing the natural ebb and flow, knowing that even in the deepest shadows, the promise of new light always lingers. It was a soft, persistent whisper carried on the gentle evening breeze, echoing profound tranquility of the moment, while the quiet astronomers on their open platforms traced the slow, deliberate paths of the celestial spheres. Another world, insulated and intricately constructed, drew its breath under the same vast sky, yet scarcely acknowledged its presence. In the cool, polished chambers of the upper city, where the air moved only at the behest of the servant's fan or through a carefully designed vent, the rhythm of life was a different sort of dance. Here, the evening hours were not a prelude to profound contemplation, but a curtain rising on a meticulously arranged comfort. As the sun dipped below the distant hazy hills, a sight often obscured by high walls or the shimmering heat, the grand residences began their own nocturnal illumination, not the crisp, silver glow of the moon, but the rich, amber warmth of countless oil lamps, suspended in delicate alabaster bowls, or held aloft by bronze figures whose faces seemed perpetually serene. The light softened the sharp edges of the day, transforming grand halls into stages for elaborate, if often understated, performances of leisure. The sounds, too, were carefully curated. The distant murmur of the lower city, the occasional bark of a dog, or the chirp of a night creature were absorbed by thick tapestries and layered carpets. Instead, one heard the gentle plash of water from a courtyard fountain, the faint rustle of silk as a robed figure moved from one shaded alcove to another, or the hushed tones of attendants ensuring every cushion was plumped, every drink chilled. Sometimes, a lute would offer a delicate melody, its notes designed to soothe, not to stir, a quiet accompaniment to conversations that drifted between affairs of state and the precise preparation of a favored dish. Dinner was not merely sustenance. It was an intricate ritual of presentation and taste. Platters of roasted fowl, artfully arranged fruits, and bread sweetened with honey arrived from kitchens where heat and clamor were contained by thick stone walls. The fragrance of herbs and spices mingled with the subtle scent of perfumed oils worn by the hosts and their esteemed guests. Each course was served with an almost reverential deference, a silent acknowledgment of the meticulous effort that had gone into its creation, from distant fields to the polished serving platter. The very act of eating became a slow, deliberate enjoyment, stretched out over hours, often punctuated by quiet discourse or the occasional, carefully modulated bursts of laughter. Beyond the dining couch, the night offered further opportunities for bespoke ease. For those of more reflective disposition, there were scrolls and cedarwood boxes, or perhaps a game of strategy played with pieces of carved onyx and jade. For others, the inner courtyards, cooled by a steady, gentle breeze funneled through subterranean channels, provided a space for quiet conversation beneath awnings of deep indigo, embroidered with silver threads that gleamed faintly in the lamplight. The presence of the actual stars was often an afterthought, a vague twinkling glimpse between the high walls, far above the immediate, comforting glow of human ingenuity. Sleep, when it finally arrived, was an affair of considerable preparation. Beds were piled high with mattresses of down and linen, draped with mosquito netting woven, so fine it seemed like spun moonlight. Attendants would carefully extinguish lamps, leaving only a single distant flicker in a hallway, ensuring darkness without disquiet. The night was not a canvas of the cosmos, but a luxurious shroud, a time for the body to recover from the gentle rigors of a day spent in curated comfort, preparing for another day of similar, refined pursuits. The heavens, with their silent, infinite tales, remained largely unread, their grand narratives overshadowed by the more immediate, tangible stories unfolding within these meticulously crafted sanctuaries of earthly ease. The quiet settled deeper, wrapping itself around the old house like a beloved shawl. The afternoon had begun its slow, deliberate surrender to evening, and the light, once bright and insistent, now lay stretched and mellow across the polished floorboards. It was a hue of aged amber, warmed by the lingering memory of the sun's direct gaze, but softened by the growing distance of the horizon. Each dust mote, caught in these languid beams, danced a silent, almost imperceptible waltz, a tiny world of motion within a greater stillness. Outside, beyond the wide, inviting window, the garden offered its own quiet narrative. The leaves on the ancient oak, just beginning to show the faintest blush of approaching autumn, shimmered with subtle internal light, as if each one held a miniature flame. They stirred with the gentlest of breezes, a breath so soft it barely rustled, merely sighing to the branches, a barely audible whisper of passing time. It was a kind of breeze that carried the faintest suggestion of damp earth and the last, lingering sweetness of fading summer blossoms, a sense so delicate it had to be sought out rather than simply received. There was a peculiar solace in the slow unfolding, a rhythm that invited the mind to unfurl itself, to shed the tighter coils of daily thought. The world outside the glass began to recede, not into nothingness, but into a blurred softness, becoming less distinct and more impressionistic. The sharp edges of perception softened, allowing for more diffused awareness, where individual details dissolved into an overall sense of peace. One's own breath seemed to deepen in harmony with the settling air, each inhalation a quiet drawing of the world, each exhalation a gentle release. A robin, bold and plump, landed on the windowsill for a brief moment, its small, dark eyes surveying the room with an almost curious tilt of its head before it launched itself back into the dimming garden. Its visit was a tiny punctuation mark in the ongoing silence, a momentary connection between the quiet of inside and the quiet of outside, a fleeting reminder of life's simple, persistent presence. The air within the room held a familiar, comforting stillness, scented faintly with old paper and polished wood, a scent that spoke of permanence, and a multitude of forgotten stories rested within the walls. As the last tendrils of truly golden light withdrew, a different quality of luminescence began to emerge. The blues deepened, the greens softened, and the distant trees took on a muted, almost dreamlike quality against the pale, emerging sky. The sense of ending was not one of finality, but a transition, a gentle shift from one state to another, much like the slow, deep breath taken before slumber. It was a time for quiet breathing, for simply being, as the day gently, irrevocably tipped towards its quiet, star-dusted close. There was nothing to chase, nothing to rush, only the spaciousness of the moment, unfolded without haste, without demand. The last whispered day, a delicate spill of ochre and rose, lingered at the window's edge, unwilling to surrender entirely to the encroaching dark. It was a color that spoke not of vibrant energy, but a quiet sigh, a gentle exhalation after a long, full breath. This pause, this interstitial moment between the bold declarations of day and the deep mysteries of night, often held the truest lessons, not in words spoken or actions taken, but in the subtle shift of the world as it settled into its evening quietude. To simply exist within such a transition felt like a small act of reverence. The air itself seemed to soften, losing its crispness and taking on the velvety texture of dusk. Sounds that were once masked by the daytime's casual hum now emerged, distinct and unhurried. The distant rustle of leaves in a breeze almost imperceptible, the quiet chirp of a solitary bird bidding its day farewell, the faint, comforting creak of the old house as it breathed around its inhabitants. These were not intrusions, but invitations, drawing the awareness deeper into the present, into the very fabric of the passing moment. There was no need to grasp, no desire to hold on to what was fading, for the beauty lay precisely in its ephemeral nature, in the understanding that this precise configuration of light and shadow, this particular blend of silence and sound, would never again be exactly the same. It was in these spaces, when the external world softened its demands, that the internal landscape began to gently unfurl. Thoughts, often tightly bound and driven by purpose through the day, loosened their grip, becoming more like drifting clouds, shapeless and unhurried. Memories, not of grand events, but of simple, sensory details, which surface unbidden. The feel of cool grass beneath bare feet on a forgotten morning, the aroma of rain on warm earth, the peculiar comfort of a well-worn blanket. These were not recollections to be analyzed or judged, but sensations to be re-experienced, brief, tender echoes of a life lived, all woven into quiet tapestry of the present. The very act of witnessing this quiet transformation fostered a sense of profound acceptance. There was a gentle liberation in letting go of the need for definition, for sharp edges, for immediate understanding. Instead, a softer knowing settled in, a deep intuition that some truths were best approached not through rigorous logic, but through a receptive heart and a patient presence. The world, in its fading light, seemed to whisper its most significant secrets not through thunderous pronouncements, but through the delicate dance of shadow, through the gradual cooling of the air, through the slow surrender of day to night. It was a quiet instruction in the art of yielding, in the wisdom of transition, in the inherent beauty of simply being. And as the last trace of the sun's farewell finally dissolved into the deepening blue, leaving behind only the promise of stars, a subtle peace descended, not as an absence of feeling, but as a quiet fullness. It was a peace of belonging to the flow, of being a gentle part of the world's quiet rhythm, recognizing that within every fading, there was an equally gentle unfolding, a continuous, seamless becoming. The stillness was not emptiness, but a quiet, boundless invitation to simply reside, bathed in the soft, encompassing presence of the unfolding night. The quietude we spoke of, that gentle turning inward, often reveals itself not in grand pronouncements or sudden revelations, but in the most subtle of shifts. It is the almost imperceptible widening of a horizon, a softness around the edges of what once seemed rigid. This is where patience finds its truest home, not as a passive waiting for something external to arrive, but as an active engagement with the present moment, allowing its own quiet rhythm to unfold. There is a profound wisdom in learning to simply witness, without the urge to interject, to hurry, or to force a particular outcome. Consider the way a seed begins its journey into a plant. There is no urgency in its initial swelling, no desperate rush to pierce the soil. It rests, absorbing, gathering what it needs from its immediate surroundings, drawing upon an ancient internal blueprint. The force it exerts, when it finally does emerge, is not one of violence, but of an inexorable, gentle persistence. It pushes with the entire weight of its inherent nature, guided by an unseen intelligence. We, too, hold within us such seeds, dormant potentials that only truly blossom when given the grace of unhurried time and the rich nourishment of quiet attention. To demand an immediate bloom is to misunderstand the very essence of growth. This unhurried approach extends beyond a realm of external observation and into the delicate landscape of our own inner world. How often do we attempt to intellectualize a feeling away, to reason with discomfort, or to rush through a period of transition, simply because the stillness feels unfamiliar or slightly unsettling? Yet, it is within these very moments of quiet apprehension that deeper understandings often begin to form, like dew collecting on a spider's web at dawn. They are not to be seized or dissected, but simply held in a tender regard, allowed to dissipate or coalesce in their own time. There is a unique kind of clarity that arises from this gentle surrender, a knowing that whispers rather than shouts. To cultivate this internal slowness is to acknowledge that not everything requires immediate resolution or a definitive answer. Some truths, much like the changing seasons, reveal themselves in layers, each transition preparing the ground for the next. The soft light of autumn fades, not with a sudden snap, but with a gradual dimming that makes space for winter's quiet introspection. Similarly, our understanding deepens when we allow thoughts and feelings to simply pass through, like clouds drifting across an expansive sky, rather than attempting to grasp and hold onto each one. This gentle detachment creates a spaciousness within, a sanctuary where true insight can root and unfurl, unburdened by the ceaseless chatter of the impatient mind. And so, we return to the breath, that most reliable anchor, a constant testament to the gentle unfolding of life. Each inhalation a quiet taking in, each exhalation a soft release. There is no hurrying the breath, no forcing to be other than what it is. It simply moves a continuous, effortless current. In aligning ourselves with this fundamental rhythm, we begin to echo its patient wisdom throughout our days, finding a quiet strength in the unhurried moment and profound peace in the simple art of being. This slow, gentle pace is not a withdrawal from life, but rather a deeper immersion into its most authentic and enduring currents. As we close our quiet journey through those forgotten observatories, where patient souls once decipher the universe's grand script, it's striking how much has shifted, yet how much truly endures. Then, the night sky was an unfiltered canvas, a direct conversation with the cosmos through a simple lens or a discerning eye. Now, our world hums with 1,000 electric lights, often dimming the starlight for city dwellers, and our telescopes are marvels of complex engineering. Yet, look up, the same ancient constellations still trace their slow, silent dance. The same moon, a silver whisper in the dark, still casts its gentle glow. While their quest for wisdom might have been etched into stone and whispered on cold nights, and ours is typed into keyboards and shared across digital screens, the core human impulse, that profound yearning to understand our place in this vast, shimmering expanse, remains unchanged. The language of the stars, though perhaps translated through different instruments, continues to speak to the same universal heart. Thank you for joining me on this reflective voyage tonight. Your presence makes these stories truly special. If this quiet moment resonated with you, please consider giving us a like, subscribing for more journeys, or leaving a comment to share your thoughts. Until our next gathering beneath the boundless sky, rest well, dream gently, and remember to always look up, for the stars await.